Hello everyone, Mr. E here. 2026 is upon us, and that means it's time for New Year's resolutions. For myself, it's going to be a resolution to stream 3 times Darktide, 3 times a week. Rain, sleet, or shine this year. I need to get back to it. It's something I enjoy doing, and I know you guys enjoy it as well, so that is on the docket. And of course, I also am going to double down. I'm going to hyper commit to continuing to produce the best Darktide content that I can. And thank you so much, guys. We had an amazing 2025. The channel is blowing up, and I am so fortunate to have all of you guys who support me in all the free ways, like commenting, sharing the videos, subscribing, liking the video, whatever it might be. Those are all very valuable, and a triple super extra special thank you to everybody who supported me by becoming a channel member or a Twitch subscriber. Now, YouTube channel members, you might have just done it for purely selfish reasons, such as getting access to the super secret special Discord, which has a download of my entire custom mod pack and also pictures and videos of my adorable dog Bernie, and also direct access to me personally, and also a whole community full of people who are hell-bent on helping you with any problem, big or small. Results not guaranteed, by the way. But yeah, maybe you did it for selfish reasons, but in any case, you helped me keep the lights on in the operation, and I truly, truly appreciate it. But this year is going to be bigger and better than last, I can promise you that. And speaking of bigger and better than last, segue into today's video, which is all about making the Zealot a bigger and better class than he currently is. So if you didn't see my most recent video, it was all about the core tenets of character design in Darktide and how I think there are certain characters, Veteran and Psyker, who I won't dog on too much today. I'll save that for their videos. Those classes are overstepping these bounds. And the bounds that I set were that you should have reasonable levels of cleave. You shouldn't be able to do more cleave damage than you do single target damage. That way that the hordes, hordes that are supposed to be a feature of a horde shooter are actually still threatening rather than how they are now. We should also have meaningful engagements with 90+% of enemies being actually in a combat with them rather than erasing them like they're not even there, because otherwise you're effectively just versing a bunch of target dummies in the Psychanium. And then finally, if you have any powerful abilities or effects, they should have meaningful costs associated with them. For instance, you shouldn't be able to screen wipe everything every 10 seconds. And there are things in the game that do that or closely approximate that. And because the Zealot adheres to these rules, he gets a meaningful way to express his skill. And this is why you see so many players with thousands upon thousands of hours maining Zealot and playing Zealot over and over and over again. It's because he is a class that can be played to the fullest of his power without relying on something that would abuse the systems of the game, right? It's just you and a weapon and then the enemy. So when you climb from Heresy difficulty up to Havoc 40, you have to learn a lot about how to move your character and how to dodge damage and how to aim for heads and position and all that sort of stuff. That is all skill expression. And because the Zealot has so much growing to do for skill expression, that's how he increases his power. That's the only way you're going to climb to Havoc 40 is by getting better at playing the class. Then he's just a more enjoyable player or more enjoyable character for a lot of players to play, because that is the reward for many players is like, oh my gosh, I can see my skills personally growing here. Compare that to, and I don't mean to dog on Psyker more than I will in his video, but compare that to a Psyker who learns about Bubble, Flame Staff when he's playing Heresy difficulty and then climbs up the ranks to Havoc 40. How much skill expression is required at a Havoc 40 level for a Bubble Flamestaff Psyker versus what it is at a Heresy level? It's just an increase in density, which the Flamestaff deals with just fine. You're still saving your bubble, right? You might have to skill up a little bit, but nowhere near as much as the Zealot needs to get good. And it really is kind of just a homogenous experience because these utilities are so powerful and they're multiplicatively powerful. They scale with the game for you versus the Zealot who has to scale his effectiveness based on his own personal skill. The same thing applies to the Veteran as well. If a Zealot sees a pack of 5 Crushers, he rolls up his sleeves, he gets in there and he gets dirty. He gets to stabbing and doing that duelist dance and murdering them. The Veteran throws 2, maybe 3 cracks cracks at them, and then he regenerates 1 or 2 of those in the time being. And so one of those is more effective for certain, it's the cracks, but one of them is ultimately going to lead to much more satisfaction and be a more engaging way to play the game, and that's getting in there and actually fighting the enemy. So if you just want to win, the Zealot might not be your best pick, but if you want to learn to play Darktide and enjoy playing Darktide, then the Zealot is an amazing pick. And this is the core that I want to come back to today when I'm talking about quote-unquote reworking him. I don't necessarily want to make the Zealot any more powerful. I want to give him more ways to have fun with what he has, to broaden his horizons, but also at the same time to carve out a little spot for him where he can have a class identity. Because as I see it, he is being hemmed in on both sides. He has a tanky melee combatant pushing in on him from that side, which is the Arbites, right? So if we get any tankier and go any more crowd control focused, we end up being the Arbites. If we get any more assassin focused or high damage glass cannon focused, we end up being melee hive scum. So we need to differentiate ourselves and keep away from these two and give ourselves some utilities and abilities and whatever it might be that really makes it special to play specifically Zealot. Give players a reason to play Zealot over these other two characters that are quite competitive in their own right. So this is the part where I will bring up the talent tree. As I did with the Ogren video, I think most of my rework suggestions will come directly affecting the talent tree, as has been proven by time and just experience. This is the easiest thing for Fatshark to affect. Adding new weapons and stuff like that is great and all, but that has a bunch of extra steps, and whatever is the easiest is the most likely that we can actually affect a change, and we have in fact seen changes. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but my suggestions as to how to change the Zealot to not be a chorus bot, just repeatedly casting chorus and balance that ability, were in fact implemented. So things that I suggest here, you know, especially if you guys sound off in the comments and say that you agree with them, hey, it's a decent chance that something will be implemented. So let's go through here, and as I said before, I don't really seek to improve the Zealot's power level, but I do want to level out certain parts of his kit and give him more options to play with, and also make him stack up a little bit better in certain regards against his competitors. So up here at the top, we got the core defensive utility, especially this line right here that has a ton of defensive nodes. I think this area of the tree is great. Really only one note, which is that this passive here, the Voice of Terra, is just a misfit for the class. 4% toughness on range kill, that is simply not enough. That's only 80% of what you would get from melee killing a single enemy with no talent points allotted at all. So I just don't understand what Zealot is picking this, and replacing this with something that is actually a reasonable choice would be a nice improvement. But then we need to start talking about blitzes, because blitzes are actually kind of a sore point. I think I'm going to reverse course a little bit on something I said about the Hive Scum a while back, which was that within when we're talking about blitzes, you really only have to compete within the class to keep them level with each other or keep them balanced. I neglected to consider that, of course, this is a shared resource through the whole team. So yes, you do have to balance within the class, like that is important to some extent, but balancing it compared to other members of the cast is also very, very important. And the real problem with the Zealot's blitzes right now is specifically these two, the ones that actually use grenades, the Stun Storm and the Immolation Grenade. Both of these are going to never get chosen over a lot of your competition's grenades. So if you think about having a Hive Scum on your team who has the rocket launcher, potentially 4 rockets, right? It would be a better use for a Hive Scum who has full rockets to run forward and shoot all of his rockets at enemies that he can see, and then back up and pick up the whole pack, versus a Zealot picking up a pack when he was completely empty, right? It's just so much better to shoot 4 rockets at effectively not even that good of targets than it is to have 3 of these on hand, because they just aren't that effective, and we'll talk about exactly why. But let's start with the one that pretty much does work. That's Blades of Faith. Blades of Faith is the classic knife. This is such a integral ability to the Zealot kit, and it feels so amazing. However, that is when you are a mouse and keyboard player. Now, many moons ago, I did do some experimenting with the controller, and let me tell you, Blitz with the Blades of Faith on the controller is not nice, because as I remember, it was bound to D-pad down, which sucked. It was terrible to throw. The real thing I would like them to do for the Blades of Faith in order to just get them to a good spot is to take some elements of the Ogryn's rock and combine it. So when I talked about the Ogryn, what I said is the Ogryn needs to have an option to quick throw the rock. Instead of swapping over and very slowly pulling this out and then aiming and throwing, he should be able to tap the button and just offhand a fucking rock into the enemy's face he's fighting. And that would be an element of the knife that we like on the rock. As for the knife, they should bring the element of the rock where you can hold the rock back and see the trajectory line of where it's going to go. So you can still quick throw the knives if you've got dead on aim and the enemy is coming at you predictably, or if you've got a long distance target, you can hold down the button and ready the knife by your side of your head there and see the exact trajectory line. I'm a personal believer that trajectories, especially for expendable resources like, grenades and stuff, should be painted with a line. If it doesn't have a direct bullet trajectory, I think it's only fair. And for me personally, a lot of using the splits is like, okay, I need to pick that gunner over there. Whiff, 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 body hit. Okay, finally headshot, right? Because you're just kind of like trying to figure out where they're even going and you can't see them most of the time. So just give the option to set up that little second longer, see the trajectory and make the shot. And that would also allow the console players, like maybe tap D-pad down once to pull out the knife and then hit your fire trigger to actually throw the knife would be a nice little change. If they wanted that control option. But yeah, that would be my only note there. I think this is a great grenade. And again, this doesn't have to be balanced against the whole cast because this is a grenade that is replenished for basically free. So we don't have to worry about whether or not this splits is better or worse than other characters in the game. The ones we do are these two over here. Let's start with the Immolation Grenade, which has a whole host of problems. The first problem here, the one that is the biggest, is that the enemies will path around this, and it is only effective when the enemies actually stand in it. So that is down here where it says, throw a grenade that leaves a layer of flaming liquid, burning and staggering enemies and barring their path. So barring their path is the operative modifier here, and this functions very similarly to the fire grenade, the incendiary bomb in Vermintide, where you throw this thing down, and if there's a situation where the enemies literally can't get to you via any other path than walking through it, they'll walk in it, and that can do some really good damage in those situations. But if you're trying to make enemies walk through a hallway or like an sort of an approach to you and take damage and perhaps thin their numbers out, the problem is the enemies will see this is on the ground and they'll just path around it. So if you don't perfectly block up the hallway, if you leave a 5-foot gap on one side, or there's an alternate route, the enemies will just back up and take that instead. So you've effectively thrown a grenade that, yeah, it blocks an area, but it didn't do any damage because the enemies just won't stand in it for any amount of time. The second thing here is that you have to actively have the enemies standing in it to deal damage, which is a huge downside. If you throw one of these down and then whatever happens, specials or boss or whatever pushes you back, and so therefore you can't continue that engagement at that spot where you were like holding the enemies in it, they're just simply going to walk through it. And most enemies, the damage is not significant enough with this thing to where enemies couldn't walk through it or walk around it and just not die. They don't take very considerable damage. Now, speaking of the damage, there's still more issues. This grenade does next to nothing against armor. You have to synergize with this with an uncanny strike weapon, meaning either the dueling sword or the dagger in most situations, and that is the only way you're going to be able to effectively deal damage against armor. And all this together, consider that the Tox Grenade on the Hive Scum is just a 100% one-to-one better option, right? The Immolation Grenade is just outclassed in every regard. The Tox Grenade can hold more charges. The Tox Grenade lingers on the ground longer. The Tox Grenade, enemies do not go out of their way to path around it. They'll walk through it, and when they do walk through it, they get stacks of this debuff really quickly that deals damage through armor, and it lingers even after they've left the pool. So they'll walk through it, track it in on their shoes, and then they'll die a couple seconds later, and they of course also explode, which does minor stagger to the enemies around them. So yeah, this grenade is so far behind the Tox Grenade that you would never ever choose it, And oh, also, I mean, it has like a 0 synergy with the kit at all. So what I would like to do for these grenades, and I'll do a similar thing for the Stun Storm grenade, is I want to wrap in a team-wide buff. I want to wrap in something that is going to help the team, because I think that the Zealot is like supposed to be melee tanky, but also have this supportive element, right? That's something we notice in his talents, in his design, that the Arbites doesn't have. So he occupies this like frontline fighter role, but also he has a lot of buffs that can help his team. He can rescue his allies faster, he can cleanse their corruption, he can keep them keep their toughness high, right? Those sort of things. So I think that having his grenades have a flair for supporting the team would be very nice. The immolation grenade here, first of all, they just need to remove the effect where the enemies just won't walk in it at all. It's really, really irritating. You know, watching enemies just avoid your fires is so stupid. But then the other thing they should do here is add a brittleness effect. This brittleness effect just increasing damage taken by everybody in the pool. So this would be something you could drop that not only would nuke the squishy enemies within it, it would obviously augment damage to everyone within the pool, but it would also enable it to deal some damage to armor and also soften up these armored enemies against many targets. So this is basically just the talent Penetrating Flame, or the blessing Penetrating Flame, that is on both the Flamer and the Flame Staff, right? These weapons, when you put the flame blaze stacks on these enemies, their armor is stripped, they get brittle, and then they take more damage as a result. So it makes sense that it would be on this grenade too, representing that like their armor is melting off or whatever. And therefore, if you got a big ass pack of armor that's coming in on you and you want to soften them up, not only is this going to deal extra damage, but it can help soften them up for the rest of the team to do their work. And therefore, it would be a lot better at doing that. So I think those two changes there would probably make it better. Honestly, you could probably even pump this to 4 charges, right? It's not all that crazy of a grenade. Moving on to the Stun Storm grenade, this one has a lot of problems as well. The Stun Storm grenade is a grenade that stuns everyone in the blast radius. It makes them stand still and do a little like jolting dance like they're having a seizure or something. The problem with this is myriad. First of all, this is a grenade that you only have 3 charges, and effectively all it does is just pauses smaller enemies that are within a medium to large AoE, right? These enemies only non-boss enemies are affected by this, and only enemies within its radius. So if you stun enemies, it goes off instantaneously when it flashes, right? So if you stun enemies that are in the radius, that's good, but this doesn't stop more enemies from just coming in after the fact, or ranged enemies from shooting at you. And what you're mostly using this grenade for is, oh shit, someone went down, I need to save them. And there's a couple of problems with that, is that bosses aren't stunned, gunners from a distance aren't stunned, and new enemies to the scene that might be following you from a different location are not stunned. So what we have here is a situation where we are actually made irrelevant by 2 different grenades that I think are just way better versions of this. I think the obvious one is the Shock Mine from the Arbites. He only has 2 of these compared to 3, but it can replenish on a 90-second cooldown if you take the node for it. Or sorry, no, he has 3 with that node, right? So a 90-second cooldown to have 3, which is the same number, or you can just have 2 with no cooldown and you get to keep your dog. That grenade lasts for 15 seconds, and albeit it has a smaller radius, at least then that 15 seconds, it will not only hold all the enemies you drop it on, but it will also catch all enemies that are coming into it as well. So you can block a whole choke point for a long time versus just stunning all the enemies that are in its AoE. The other grenade that is incredibly competitive with this is the rocket launcher, because you know, like this grenade effectively is like, okay, I need everything that's in this medium to large AoE around me to fuck off for a couple seconds while I do a thing. What's better than giving enemies a short time of stun? It's sending them to hell with a huge explosion. So why would you choose a grenade that just says, okay, all the enemies time out, and then you can get an ally up, and then you have about 2 seconds before all these enemies try to fuck you again? well, why don't we just use a rocket launcher that would just kill 95% of those enemies and leave the last couple that didn't die sprawled on the ground? This would even knock bosses back, right? So even the bosses would be shunted back so that you could get a res or whatever you needed to do at the same time. And of course, you can get more charges. You can get 4 charges on Hive Scum. So we have to compete again with the rocket launcher with something on the Hive Scum who has like these, S tier grenades. But that's what I was saying before is like, if you had this grenade and the Hive Scum has literally anything, you're just going to let the Hive Scum have all the grenades. There's no way this is anywhere near as good. The real problem here is that this grenade is purely reactive, right? Something has to already be fucked up for you to want to throw these, because if you throw it ahead of time, if you're like, okay, here comes the horde, I'm going to stun it, it's like, dude, okay, great. Now, like, some of the enemies can't fight it back, but we probably could have handled that otherwise, right? You really can, if you use these proactively, it does effectively nothing for you. And if you use them reactively, it might not even work for what you need it to work for. So what I would like to do here is like manifold a couple different things. The first thing is this should have an effect on every enemy that can see the grenade. So the close range enemies, of course, like your normal size enemies, have them be stunned in the normal way. Enemies that are a long distance, like gunners, give them the suppression effect for the same duration. So that, this is like a sniper. He's scoped in. He's got his fucking night vision goggles on, and this flashbang goes off. You're going to tell me this guy can see? He's looking at this flashbang through a sniper scope? Yeah, he's donezo, or at least for a little while, till his eyeballs reset. So give that suppression effect so that when you drop one of these, it actually does stop all enemies from attacking you. And also, perhaps with a reduced duration, this should apply to bosses, including captains with shields up, right? Give this a unique effect that nothing else has, which is the temporary timeout on everything. And then it would actually be a good effect. There's one more thing I think it could be optional, but allowing this ability to give you some offensive capability, to be something you would actually use to buff your damage. If every enemy affected by this was guaranteed criticals on them for that duration. It's only like 5 seconds or whatever the stun duration is. I haven't actually timed it, but yeah, it's pretty dang short. But 5 seconds where you get guaranteed crits, for many enemies, that's a melee headshot, and you were already going to shoot him in the head. But this would be something similar to the way in Dungeons and Dragons, if an enemy is incapacitated, you get a guaranteed critical against them when you attack them in melee, right? Because obviously they can't defend themselves, and obviously you're going to go for the weak point. So all these enemies are stunned, and it would boost your damage, and therefore you'd have a grenade where when shit really hits the fan, and like, a chaos spawn and the twins and a whole horde comes in on you, you drop one of these, everything is stunned and paused, and you can actually get rid of the horde and start burning those bosses. And then it would actually be a valuable grenade to choose over other stuff, and it would again fit that relatively support focused role where you're buffing the team's damage and providing some synergy there. So that's what I want to do with that part. Let's move on down, guys, and talk about some auras and stuff. No notes, really. The Zealous aura is a little bit weird. I don't think stamina cost is really an effect that many people are writing home about, but the auras are relatively free to choose at which point you want to allocate, and I think these two are doing fine enough, so I don't think there's too much to really say there. So in this section right here, we have a number of nodes that I understand that when they reworked this class, they didn't take out all of the nodes and replenish them with new ones. A lot of them are reused from old times, so we'll see some of these in here, but also they did come up with a couple of new nodes that I think are kind of stinkers in the current way that the class is designed and need to be changed over entirely. So I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and point those out in case Fatshark is not aware. First of all, punishment. Melee attacks that hit at least 3 enemies take 8% impact strength for 8 seconds, or sorry, grant 8% impact strength for 8 seconds, stacking 5 times. At max stacks, gain uninterruptible. You're just not hitting 3 enemies per melee attack often enough to keep this effect up, right? This would assume that you are fighting a horde with a weapon that doesn't actually kill the horde for an extended amount of time, and also that we would value 40% impact strength, which, just to give you some, like, perspective, the Ugrin has a talent, just a single point talent that gives him 25% impact strength all the time, plus other buffs called Slam. He also has a Keystone augment that's basically a single talent that can give you up to 80% impact, right? So these sort of things are just like way better than this. And yeah, so there's really no reason you'd ever take that. There's also no reason you'd ever take out of pocket here. Melee backstab kills, first of all, very niche thing already, replenishes 5% of your missing ammo from your reserve and swap into your range weapon, stacking 5 times. So you can replenish a quarter. Basically, you can refill a quarter of your magazine, but you're not stealing this ammo. This is not free ammo you're generating. This is just taken from your reserve. So it's basically doing 1/4 of a reload for you if you can get 5 backstabs. If you can only get 1 backstab before you swap to your range weapon, it's 1/20th of your ammo, and it's still your ammo, which is garbage. I don't know why that. I have no idea what the idea behind that was. We also have down here grievous wounds. I just don't understand the value of stagger on melee weak spot hits for this class with the the critical multipliers and stuff that this class has. Headshot kills are usually our headshot hits are usually kills. I don't know what the stagger modifier here is really doing. Master Retribution and stuff is fine, but then over here we also have some very strange block break things. This is not a blocking focused class. In fact, the Arbites and the Ogryn are sort of more designed around block, so this sort of thing would be a much better pair for them. The Zealot doesn't have any shield weapons yet. Fatshark, let's get on that. So he doesn't really have any weapons where you could be both blocking and on offense, unless you're doing like parries or something. But this is just kind of a very weak effect unless you are going for like a res or something. And then impassable here is just too niche. Perfect blocking and attack restores 3 dodges, so this effectively allows you to dodge forever, but yeah, I just don't see the use of these. So these are just weird, like, I get their flavored talents and they were going for something to give the class more diversity, but I don't think this is the way we should go about it. Let's come down here to the abilities here, and honestly, the abilities, I don't have a whole lot to say. So let's start with Fury of the Faithful. No notes, literally no notes. This is maybe like the most staple Zealot ability. I think this ability is such a good fit for the class and a good fit for the game. There's a reason this has remained pretty much unchanged since the dawn of time, although when the game released, it did replenish 100% of your toughness. But other than that, this ability has always been super solid. Not only does it really fit the Zealot's whole theme and thing of high single target damage and gap closing and speed, but it's halfway offensive, halfway defensive, and it can enable weapons that otherwise would struggle because it gives you that guaranteed like critical hit plus rending on your next hit. So yeah, just a quality ability, and I would not have them change it for the world. So here we have Shroud Field, and Shroud Field is a little bit of a tricky discussion because on its face it does kind of rub up against rule number 2, which is you must meaningfully engage with enemies in combat, and that is kind of stepped on because it's a stealth ability, and stealth necessitates avoiding enemy attention and enemy engagement, and then you come out of stealth and you instantly murder the target you're after. That does seem to like kind of violate that rule. However, they have done a sizable rework to this ability such that you cannot infinitely chain it like you used to be able to with double stab and all that stuff. So now you are kind of forced to spend at least 60-70% of your time outside of stealth and actually engage with the game. And this ability, it is certainly could be used to speedrun an entire mission and to just skip ahead of all the objectives and just corpse run between your allies and just get to the end of the game without actually engaging anything. But personally, I believe that in terms of how we're talking about like design these classes, we should design the abilities and stuff with good intentions in mind, right? We're not looking to design abilities to block out those bad faith players who would use them to cheese the game. Certainly there will be those players who do that, but I have very rarely, if ever, encountered a player who is using Shroud Field to in anything outside of solo to actually like cheese the game and skip encounters in order to just win the mission the cheap way. I think that most abilities in this game are used in their proper way, which is you enter into the area and you fight all the enemies and then you clean them up and then you go to the next area, fight all the enemies, etc. That's the enjoyable way to play the game, and that's why people play. So as long as we're considering this ability in that framework, I think it's perfectly fine. You know, does it have the capability to one-shot enemies? Like bosses and stuff? Yes, but you have to bring the Thunder Hammer, which is a trade-off in itself. And it is not, certainly not too big of a problem, because if it was a huge problem, if it was overpowered as people claim it to be sometimes, then you'd see everyone running it. But it does require a high level of skill input to get the value out of it, and even then that value is not like astronomical. So I would say that this ability is not a problem as it currently stands, so I'll leave it be. The boss sort of thing with it used to be called Assassinate, the other node that used to be down here that made it a shorter duration, but made you give more damage on your single hit. If people want to do that, I think that should be available to them, but just simply make it be an augment for the node that literally just doesn't put you into stealth, right? It just gives you the big buff, and maybe it can get like some sort of like temporary like threat reduction or something. I don't know what it is, but like, yeah, make it so that like the stealth thing isn't active, and then we can still have that playstyle in the game, because I know people really did like that sort of playstyle. I think this is honestly fine. I don't think that Shroudfield is causing any current problems. The one that I do think is causing problems, or it's causing less problems than it was before the rework, when it was able to be spammed every 20 seconds, and it's like a 7-second ability. This is one of the stronger abilities in the game, Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude here. And the real problem that I have with this ability is that this is one of the more boring abilities in the game to use. We have a class that is all about go, mile-a-minute aggression, getting up on the enemies and being in combat and feeling the thrill of the fight. And then we have an ability that turns off all of the enemies and turns you off. And turns me off, personally, if I have to say. I am soft right now thinking about how boring it is to play Chorus. The Chorus bot, basically, just walks towards enemies. All the enemies stop what they're doing, and you can't act either. So I don't know how this managed to land itself as a design within a class that is so aggressive and so, like, you know, making a moment-to-moment decision is so impactful in the Zealot's gameplay. We have abilities that where literally a split second of difference is all the difference in the capability of the power or whatever. And then we have the ability where you just stand around for 7 seconds and get a full game state reset. Doesn't really gel to me. So here's what I would do with this ability. I've been saying it for a long time, but I think it would be a great way to go about it. Give this ability the Barden Outcast Engineer treatment, where he has a bar of holy power. Basically, he needs to charge it up over time. Either it just passively charges up over time, or he can read from his book. That'll give us a reason to actually have the book in the thing. The Zealot pulls out the book, and he can like regen. That would be effectively Barden cranking his minigun. And then once you have that full bar of your prayer juice, or whatever we want to call it, then you can choose how much to use at a time, right? And that would be great, because just one pulse of this effect is good. It can give everybody the gold buff immediately. 2 pulses also has an effect, because 2 pulses is the second pulse will stagger a boss 1 time. And 5 pulses is the cutoff for activating these abilities, Ecclesiarch's Call here and Holy Cause. So, and you can get 7 pulses total, right? So if you want to just use a tiny little bit, that's cool. You can top off everybody's gold, give it an internal cooldown where you can't just spam it every couple of seconds. So like you have to commit, like, is this cast going to be really long, or is this going to be a short cast? And then, you know, after 15 seconds or so, you can choose to cast it again. And that's, that decision making like that will free you up to do more stuff. Now, also, if this could be done one-handed, that would be way better too. But even just unbreaking this or unbinding this from being a all or nothing ability would be a huge step in the right direction. Because right now, there's really not much decision to be made here. You press the button, you go for the full 7 pulses, right? There's almost no reason to ever not go for the full 7 pulses and buy your entire team tons of time. Right now, there's no reason to do that. But if you were like, okay, you have the option, 1 pulse for topping off gold toughness, 2 pulses for and getting back into the combat, 2 pulses for staggering everything around us, or 5 up to 5 or more pulses for these damage buffs and stuff, then you would actually have a choice in your hand depending on your scenario at the exact moment. So that'd be a great place to start, and let's just go from there. Finally, let's come down here to the bottom of the tree and address the keystones. Personally, I think that Blazing Piety and Martyrdom are in good places. Martyrdom has finally been buffed enough to the point where this is an ability that more people can take. That was really what it was limited by, is like the buffs offered and the defenses offered were just not enough to justify playing in such a precarious situation. But I think that this is a pretty cool and viable way of playing. We also have Blazing Piety, which is just all around quality. My main issue, my main contention is with Inexorable Judgment over here, which has always just felt like Martyrdom Light to me. We have Martyrdom that already offers you attack speed and damage, but you have to lower your health or your wound state in order to get it. This doesn't require you to do that, but it's a much less of a buff. So we have like Martyrdom without the downsides, but without any of the upsides. And there's no builds that this over here enables that Martyrdom wouldn't also enable. And honestly, there's no builds that Inexorable Judgment is like good for, where replacing it with Blazing Piety wouldn't just give you similar or better results. And Blazing Piety can also give the whole team 10% crit chance, which is insane. So what I would do with this ability here is just, or this Keystone rather, is just replace it. I think that this Keystone could be replaced with the feature that I have always wanted for the Zealot. And the thing that I think I've been saving for last year, the thing that I think would really help to define the Zealot in the role that it has, I think that the Zealot needs a weapon specialist Keystone, just like the veteran has, right? And this weapon specialist Keystone should be able to be played in two different ways. There should be a weapon specialist Keystone which encourages you to use a swapping between ranged and melee. Perhaps it starts out with a weapon specialist Keystone and then it forks and gives you exclusive options. But one of these options should give you the swapping back and forth benefits. Give some range benefits to the class where if you want to swap back and forth between a shotgun or a revolver and your main weapon, then it will be buffed by this class. The other one should give you the complete opposite option, turning off the ability to use a ranged weapon and making you instead into the Grail Knight from Vermintide 2, giving you 2 melee weapons. This alone would be, so having the option to buff a ranged and melee weapon is cool in its own right, because that's one of the main things that the Zealot really lacks, is because he doesn't really have a huge impact on his build variety by what ranged weapon you choose. Therefore, his entire build variety is linked to what melee weapon he chooses, therefore his build variety is a lot smaller than other classes. So having a big buff on a Keystone that pumps range weapons will open up a whole variety of builds there. But what would also open up a massive variety of builds would be to have an option where you replace both of your weapons with melee weapons. And then you can have something for your ranged and something for your melee, and introduce a shield weapon to him so we can actually have like a tanky weapon as well. Just having a anti-armor as well as having a horde clear weapon, that would give Zealot a very, very unique role where he can be in melee combat with different enemies and always be prepared. And that would actually set him aside so hard over competitive characters. You know, you see if you're playing like Shroudfield, right, you see like a boss or something, you could swap and you could actually bring Thunderhammer for massive single target destruction. And then when you're not using Thunderhammer, you can swap back into Dueling Sword or Dagger or whatever other light fast weapon you want to use. And this alone would open up so many different build varieties, because now you'll want talents that not only help your sneaky fast assassination weapon, but you'll want talents that affect your heavy hitting weapon as well, and it would give you interesting decisions to make on that front. So these are just ideas that I've had, and that is one that I think would go so hard for the Zealot and really, really help to solidify him as the premier frontline melee fighter. You know, we've got the Hive Scum, who is he has tons of variety because his ranged and melee and support capacities are all relatively balanced against each other, and he'll get buffs in the future, don't worry. But and then we have the Arbites, who's got like all this melee competency, and then he's also got the dog, and he's got all these tricks he can pull and stuff, tactics he can use with shock mines and whatnot. Giving the Zealot something like this would really, really, really sell him to people. It's like, oh, I want to be a melee fighter. Who better than the guy who literally can just go all melee all the time? So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little thought experiment into what might come to the Zealot. I will do my best to push in every avenue that I can to get some of these changes made. If you like the changes that I suggested, let me know down in the comments. Just so I don't push for the wrong things. And let me know what you want to hear from next, or if you got any other ideas about changes for classes. I think the next class I want to talk about is probably Veteran. So look out for that video in the near future. And thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.